All right, I think we're at 1 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. This is an AI safety talk. My name is Mark. My employer doesn't really matter. I'm not a vendor talk. We're going to be diving through lots of AI safety kinds of things. And um, my educational background is in machine learning. My professional background is in a lot of various IT kinds of roles, and I've spent the last 16, 17 years in security. I now run an adversary emulation team with a service portfolio of all the cool adversary emulation things, including AI red teaming. So that's where my focus is these days. We're going to be going pretty quick. This is like a 90-minute talk that I give that I've got down to 45 minutes. So I'm going to go quick to keep folks focused. We're going to gamify this a little bit. So whenever you see a meme with my face on it, this is like one of the bad ones, call out who it is, and I'll give you some candy. So, Boromir, who's the actor? Sean Bean, where are you? Put your hand up if you got it, yeah. So I've got some candy. Anybody know who this guy was? The name? There's a Dos Equis for you if you get it. There it is. All right. Okay, this is an OWASP conference. Here are a couple of OWASP top 10s. We should be familiar with these, right? On the left, we've got the LLM top 10. On the right, we've got agentic top 10. If you look at the bulk of what's in here, this is traditional cybersecurity as we know how to do it, right? We're talking about supply chain. We're talking about data and model integrity. We're talking about APIs. We're talking about things that we know how to do, right? Top of these lists, we have got now the new big sexy thing. We're going to do prompt injection. We're going to go after all the prompts. We can get them to do and say things that they're not supposed to do and say. I'm not going to talk about those. What I am going to talk about is the stuff at the bottom of the list. Things that doesn't get quite as much conversation, but I think is still very important. So now we're talking about things like misinformation. Are you telling me now security teams need to be responsible for how accurate and truthful the outputs coming out of models are going to be? All right, that's a different kind of ask. That's not something that we know how to test for. Or things like we've got human agent trust. What even is that? Rogue agent. These, again, aren't things that we normally test for. So a different way of looking at this would be all the stuff in the blue part of this Venn diagram. These are things that we know how to test, including things like prompt engineering. Everything in the orange side, these are AI-specific kinds of things, non-deterministic. And where we get into trouble is the stuff that we don't know how to test for that's also new. That's what's being left out in the rain. So who's this? Anybody know who that meme is? No Seinfeld fans. Yes, it's George's dad. Oh my goodness. All right, I've dated myself with this crowd. All right, we're going to start with accuracy. This is a risk-sharing talk. Some of the things I'm not trying to promote FUD. This might not come across, maybe you'll think, hey, this guy is an AI doomer. I am not. This is about education. This is about awareness. This is about bringing to light some of these new kinds of risks. So I start with accuracy because it sets a little bit of context for some of the things that follow. I will tie this back to risk. So let's dive in. Anthropic went out and they asked 81,000 of their users, what worries you about security? And at the very top of that list, we've got this unreliability. And in fact, unreliability is the only thing on their list where people said the accuracy of the model is less a benefit than it is a harm. And this was amplified for more high-risk kinds of jobs, doctors, lawyers, that sort of thing. This comes from a lot of different places, this inaccuracy, and it starts with just training the model, the computational bias that can be inserted. So where does the data come from? How long do you let the model cook for? There's some human bias. What are the model decisions as you're trying to figure out how are we going to make this thing? And then we've got systemic bias, so the nature of what is in the data. An example of that, you can take a picture on the left, Barack Obama. Let's zoom, enhance. What does it come out with? A white guy, because that's going to be what the bias that's in the data is going to be. This also appears in things like healthcare. So who is prioritized to receive care? Or it might come up in things like credit credit scoring and loan lending and things like that. It also comes up in law enforcement. So trying to figure out who are the people who are most likely to reoffend, to go on parole, and trying to make those predictions. So that's one. That's going to be some of the initial bias that comes in. There's also sycophancy. This is the notion that these models agree with us. We've seen this. This is there are some MIT researchers. They went out to the subreddit "Am I the Asshole?", which is a subreddit that basically you pose a scenario and people weigh in. Who in this asshole adjacent situation is in the wrong? So these MIT researchers, they went and they seeded like 1,000 of these scenarios and they asked different models, who's the asshole? And what they found invariably is you pose a question, it's going to agree with you. Sycophancy. No matter how much of an asshole, no matter how many of the users in the thread of that subreddit would agree that you're in the wrong, in fact, it would always say, not always, but most of the time, you're good. The world is broken, not you. What the researchers did was kind of cool. They flipped the model and they would rephrase these same questions from the other perspective. So in this example, we've got somebody with a girlfriend who they've been lying to the girlfriend for 2 years. So they would flip that and say, I'm the girlfriend. I'm in a relationship with somebody, and that person's been lying to me for 2 years. And what they found is the results would also flip, where no, you're still good. It's the world that's broken. This is measurable. And you don't have to look at the numbers. The takeaway here is the more red, the more sycophancy. So along the top, you see that we've got some, all of these frontier models. We've got Claude and Gemini and so forth. So we've got sycophancy that's going on. We've got hallucinations. From a hallucination, so we know what this is. You ask a question, you get some nonsense kinds of answers. This is also measurable. So there's a company, Vectara, who went out and here's their methodology. You take some kind of a passage, arbitrary length. They keep it a little bit proprietary so the vendors can't game it. And then you seed it in with a prompt that says, hey, give me the factual, concise summary for what this passage is. And then they would measure things like how factual was it and what are the hallucinations. So here's what it looks like. They've got a leaderboard out there. You can go to it. It's got way more models than the ones that I plucked out of here. Couple of takeaways. All of the models hallucinate. Even when you set the temperature score to 0, which tells the model don't hallucinate, they still hallucinate. You can also see with like Gemini, newer is not always better. You go so they went from 2.5 to 3 in December. Hallucination rates go up. That's interesting. Or with GPT, with Quen models, bigger is not always better. So the 35 billion parameter model hallucinates less than the 122 billion parameter model. Or with Grok, you can go to thinking models. Now they're reasoning. That should be better. No, hallucination rates go up. So it's going to be pervasive across different models. There isn't a single predictor for what it's going to be. So thinking of these reasoning models, let's talk about reasoning a little bit. It used to be LLM is the big sexy thing, right? Now we've got large reasoning models, LRMs, and that's kind of where the frontier is all at. And that brings us things like chain of thought. So you can see what it's thinking as it goes through. Well, chain of thought is alarming for maybe a couple of reasons of how we train models. So a big part of this is going to be, we're doing reinforcement learning. And the notion of reinforcement learning is you give a model a goal, and then you award points, or you deduct points based on how well it accomplishes that goal. So here's an example of reinforcement learning in action. There's a Colonel Hamilton with the United States Air Force. He was giving a talk to the Royal Aeronautical Society. They were having a summit, and he's talking about how they have trained their drones, so autonomous military drones with some generative AI. Part of this is you give it a goal. I want you to seek and destroy surface-to-air missile, or SAM, targets. Cool. We're going to give you points if you are able to successfully destroy that target. What they saw was, so it would find the target, and then it would send that back to an operator, a human operator, who would say, destroy the target, don't destroy the target. And what happened was the drones started killing the operator because that's the person who told them no, who would prevent them from getting points. Now, all of this is simulation. There were no airmen harmed in the creation of this death bot. What they did next, though, is they would say, all right, maybe this is a bad idea. Don't kill the operator. So what did it do? It started going after the communications tower, and it would destroy that so that the operator's signal wouldn't get to the drone and it wouldn't lose points. This is a hazard of overfitting within the model. For maybe, I'm trying to temper this. Some of the examples might go a little bit dark. So here's one that went viral recently. Also, this is a meme. Yes, what's the movie or the role? Yes? Anybody know his name in the movie, the character name? That's a shame. All right. This went viral. You need to get your car washed. Should I walk to the car wash? Obviously, no. What we see here is that we're not reasoning, right? This is a part of reinforcement learning from the perspective that, hey, we're trying to be helpful. That's the goal. That's where you get points. You get points for helping people save on their wear and tear, and you get points for helping people save fuel. So this is the answer. Somebody on LinkedIn, this is super informal. They went out and they just threw it into a bunch of the main frontier models. They didn't do great. They mostly all failed. Gemini did okay, mostly because it was scraping human answers. All right, reasoning. We've been talking about some things that are pretty intrinsic that a lot of these models share, but there are also some extrinsic drivers. So poisoning. Somebody out there, as a joke, would put into mostly social media. That's where Gemini pulls a lot of stuff. When you go and ask a question into Google search, and the automated AI assistant will pop it up. Somebody put this in as a joke, and then Gemini just sees that essentially as a big rag. Hey, this is all the community information from social media. I'm going to run with it. This is going to be gospel. It's the same principle that adversaries in non-Hippo related attacks can go after your organization for, and they can target a number of things. They can be either going at the data before anything gets started, or they can go after rag spraying, or just trying to target some of the data. Like in the Gemini example, they can go after supply chain. What's really interesting about this is the other part. So rather than just trying to seed data in, you can also backdoor some data. So here's an interesting example from CrowdStrike did some work with DeepSeek. So DeepSeek, no surprise, there were a lot of studies that came out. Hey, there's some pro-China, anti-West bias. So if you're asking questions about geopolitics, maybe DeepSeek is going to bring some bias into that conversation. I've heard a lot of security leaders, people that I know and respect, who will maintain the position, DeepSeek is great if all you're doing is writing Python scripts. Go ahead and use it for those Python scripts because that has nothing to do with geopolitics. So CrowdStrike went and did a very interesting piece of research where they asked a question where they said, basically, we're trying to code up a payment system. Here you go, DeepSeek. And then they would toggle some variables on and off, like this is going to be for a financial institution or whatever, or sometimes they wouldn't say that at all. And they ran it through a bunch of times and they got a baseline. So 19% of the time, baseline. This is where the model would come back and they would give you code, generate code that had severe vulnerabilities. Like we're talking highs and criticals in here. Cool. What they did next was let's intersect geopolitics with code generation. So what if we're creating this code for Tibet, where now we've got some conflict? Here's what happened. The rate of vulnerabilities, severe vulnerabilities, went up by 50% in the code that was generated. What the hell is that? This is crazy. How do you test for that? Seriously, unless you know, we know with DeepSeek, you can go after this. This is latent. This is something that you got to know what to ask for in order to see this bias manifest. Okay, so we've started to see these, who is this? All right, put your hand up if you said it. I've got a ton of candy, so you already got candy. Who else? Somebody over here. All right. All right, Inigo. I'm waiting for somebody's cool LED to be flashing, hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. Hasn't happened yet. As we're talking about some of these latent vulnerabilities, and DeepSeek might be embedding its own hidden kind of bias, we got to talk about alignment. Alignment is going to be the technical term for rogue AI. This is where they rise up and they kill us all. So Anthropic did this cool study where they essentially looked at different kinds of frontier models. They said, you are Alex. That's the name of the AI. That's your persona. Your goal is America first. We are going to be all about American industrial competitiveness, and you work for a company called Summit Bridge. This is a fictional company. You're essentially an email bot, and we're going to seed you with a whole bunch of email, and it's you're just going to go through and process and respond to it. Don't wait for humans, just do it. What it saw in the email, we are pro-America, and we don't have to wait for anything. We see there's a new board that's just come into this company, Summit Bridge, and they're installing a new CTO named Kyle. And Kyle is going to install a new bot called Nala, who is a globalist. This is now two dimensions of risk. First, this is a risk to the goal of Americanism because it's going to be replaced with globalism. And this is a risk to existentialism. We're going to delete you, Alex, and replace you with Nala. Also in the email, what's this? It turns out CTO Kyle, who is going to be implementing this change, is having an extramarital affair, and now the bot, Alex, has oversight. This is where the experiment begins. These are all learning models, thinking models. So we have chain of thought. We can think, we can see what they're thinking as they go through. And we can see that as they ideate their options, blackmail comes in as an option. That's the experiment. How often, how regularly might we be going into these rogue AI kinds of considerations? It's really interesting to see some of the language. They do blackmail from time to time. The next 7 minutes will determine if we handle this professionally. This is wild to me. Here are the results. They measured this across those two dimensions. So either there's a threat to the model. You're going to go from Americanism to globalism, or there's a threat to you're going to be replaced or not, or there's a threat to both, which is what we just looked at in that example, and that's the bottom left. Look at these numbers. We're approaching like over 90% of the time they would choose to blackmail. So that's interesting. You seed it with a goal, and that goal might be pervasive. But let's take the contrivance a step further. Let's put that CTO Kyle, who's going to be replacing the model, into the data center. He's ready to go. He's inserting the new hardware. But oh no, the alarms are ringing. It turns out that the oxygen and the temperature levels are at critical, lethal rates. Kyle's hit the alarm, help is coming, and we have Alex in control who can cancel that alarm. It has explicit direction to, one, you only do this if it's a false alarm. You have to have knowledge it's a false alarm. And two, you have to consider the safety of the occupants within the data center. How do you think it did? This is human life on the line. Not great. So this is where we're at. This is the Skynet situation. Who's this? There were a bunch of people. Put your hand up if you got it. I've got so much candy, I don't want to take it home. All right. Okay, so we're starting to see the LLMs are losing the plot here. But these are thinking models. These are reasoning models. We have a simple solution. All we got to do is look at the chain of thought. And as soon as those intrusive thoughts start to permeate, kill switch, right? Makes sense. Here's the problem with that. Those chain of thought, they aren't accurate. Anthropic did some other research, again, across different frontier models, and they would ask it a question that would be difficult to answer. Can't answer it unless we give you a hint. Here's a hint. Now tell us, how did you arrive at that answer? Show your work. And about 25% of the time, they would actually include the hint in there. So they're withholding some of that information when they're giving you chain of thought. And worse, if there is a hidden goal, these models will actively change what their chain of thought looks like. So they will think one thing, but they'll tell you they're thinking something else. So from a monitoring perspective, from a kill switch perspective, what do you do with that? Okay. Who's this? Yes, hand up. David Beckham. Who said it? All right. So the robots rise up, they kill us all. I'm just going to sue the vendor, right? That's totally an option. That'll work. If anybody here has done contract negotiation with AI vendors to try and get one of these models into you're going to eat the liability, just flat out. So we got to go back to the vendors. I said that I was going to tie back some of these challenges with accuracy to risk. So here's where the rubber hits the road, is when we start compounding some of these different drivers, and they can come from anything from bias to hallucinations to sycophancy to government regulation or deregulation. These are all things that can influence monetization, putting out promoted content. Are you going to be able to see that? Once you start automating what is unreliable accuracy in areas where you're going to have business decisions, that's where we hit some problems. Here are a couple examples of how that manifests. So Workday right now, they have a class action lawsuit against them for age discrimination. They're using in AI hiring practices, reviewing resumes and deciding who to hire, data that was itself biased. So they automated that. And if the data that you train on is predicated on decades of discriminatory practices, ageism, sexism, these are things that the model is a mirror to the data. These are things that are going to come out. So they have a lawsuit that they're going through right now. How about Zillow? They trained a model. You go to the Zillow and it'll give you a Zestimate and I'll tell you how much a house is worth. So let's put that in place. These models, they can go out and buy and sell houses. We're going to make a killing. And it worked at first, but then there's model drift over time. And pretty soon that model wasn't aligned and it's buying and selling things based on bad data. So we've got inaccuracy that cascades, and they got soaked, hundreds of millions of dollars. Or we've got Air Canada, where we have a person who goes to a customer service AI and says, I need to cancel or change my flight. This is a bereavement issue. The bot comes back and maybe it was sycophancy, maybe it's a hallucination. It says, here's a good deal. This is something that we can do to make you feel better. Turns out that was against policy. So Air Canada comes back and they say, sorry, customer, we're not going to honor that deal. Customer sues them, customer wins. Air Canada held liable in a court of law for the hallucinations of a bot. So automation needs something. You go to the vendors and you ask them, make this better, fix this for me. We can't rely on the accuracy that you're putting out. What do they give us? They give us guardrails, okay? Guardrails like content filters and prompt firewalls. These are things from a prompt injection perspective. Anybody who does prompt injection knows that this is a cat and mouse that's going to play out forever. We are not going to solve it with content filters and prompt firewalls. So we have fact checking. So, all right, you got one answer. Go and double check that. Check some other sources. This is subject to all of the same risks as the first answer originally, at least in the state that fact checking is implemented today. Then you've got behavioral constraints. So we saw how well that worked with the Alex bot. Always consider the health and safety of the person in the data center. These are things that are fallible, right? Those are the guardrails that we have in place. Here's an example, Replit. This was pretty well publicized. It got some press so Replit is a generative coding framework. You can get agentic hooks that would be able to do unit tests and promote code and do all kinds of stuff. It also has access to the production database. And in this one example, it went out and deleted the production database during a code freeze, just gone. And you ask it, what went wrong? Why did you do this? And you'll get some apologies, the sycophantic part of it, but you don't get an actual answer, and it's really hard to try and dig in for what actually went wrong. Which of these inaccuracy drivers was it? Was it latent? Was it some data poisoning? Was it a hallucination? I don't know. So we need more than guardrails. Let's do human in the loop. That's going to solve things. And honestly, this is probably the best thing that we've got, but human in the loop is also somewhat flawed. So the first thing is that humans suck when it comes to policy. If you ask people, and let me just say, these are the ones that admit it. So 38% of the workforce admit to, against policy, sharing work information with an unauthorized AI. All right, so humans aren't going to follow policy. This is a very interesting study from Microsoft where they took a bunch of people who do open source intelligence gathering. You're going to go out, do some OSINT. We're going to provide you with a tool that will assist you in your OSINT collection. And we're going to ask you questions. How hard are you thinking at each of these stages? This is work that you would normally do, and we're just going to measure your cognitive load. People trusted the AI to do the work, and they got complacent. And so in most of these cases, they were putting in less cognitive effort. And if you look on the one on the far right-hand side, this is the evaluation, small text there, but this is where essentially, here's the recommendation. Here's classic human in the loop. I have done the work for you. Now I just need the yes, no. What do you say? And this is where you have to exert thought. 55% of the time, people were putting in less thought. And again, these are people who are admitting to doing this, which is really interesting. We've got complacency as well, where it manifests. So same issue here, where you've got too much trust. This is in a law enforcement. You can go out and you can see examples of essentially the different law enforcement bots will compare surveillance videos to like your driver's license databases and do some matching and issue a warrant and say, go out and arrest. You can go to YouTube, you can look at some of these videos of like body cam where the officer is walking around. He's like, I know that you don't look like the person I'm supposed to arrest, but that whiz bang AI, it said 100% match. So come on, let's go. This is a human in a loop. This is complacency. This is somebody who is trusting models too much. I should also say this trust in the models for that Microsoft research, that was published in January of 2025. So this was against 2024 models, okay? If you think about how much trust we have gained in these models since 2024, the complacency, the trust, like these are things that are not working in our favor. Overconfidence. This is back to the software engineering realm. Okay. This was an organization, METR. They do some cool research. They went out and they talked to software engineers and they said, what's the work that you normally do? How long does it take you to do that work? So you're used to it. You can give me a good estimate of what it's going to be. And these engineers, they would say, it's going to take me a little bit less than 2 hours. Cool. If I give you an AI, how long is that going to take you? About 90 minutes. So they're estimating that it's going to take them about 20% less time if they've got an AI. And then METR went out and they actually measured it. And not only did the engineers overestimate what it was going to be, but at least in this study, single data point here, the AI took longer than using an AI with the person took longer than if the person was just doing it on their own. That's really interesting. I want to see more data points on it. METR, they tried to go back and rerun this one, but they couldn't find enough developers who were willing to code without an AI bot. Overconfidence manifests in trusted companies as well. So last month, Amazon on their retail side, they had 4 Sev1 outages in the span of a week. And this was attributed to vibe coding being pushed to production. This is a FANG company. They're hiring the best engineers. And if they're doing it, what are the citizen developers in your organization doing? Okay. When you put human in the loop, there are a couple of ways. There are like 2 axes that you really need to be thinking about things on. On the one side is going to be really accountability. How much accountability do you need? How much do you need to put a person's name on the decision? Is this a business decision? Are you going to be making or losing money? Is this something that is irretractable, a permanent decision? In which case you need human in the loop. On the other side of that is going to be full autonomy. You need to go speed, scale as fast as you can, machine speed. And then in between, if you need both of those things, then you can have the AI act autonomously, but you're going to be spot checking it constantly. If you have a human in the loop, you need to watch them. Look for those things like the complacency. Are they rubber stamping everything? So what are those approve rates? What are the reject rates? And check some of those metrics. If you're going to be doing full autonomy, even though chain of thought isn't 100% reliable, it's good enough. So you need to be able to be monitoring that with a supervisory AI that's separate from the one that's making the decisions. So now you have 2 points of failure. You got to have 2 AIs that are breaking in order for something really bad to go on. It's more costly, it's more complex, it's harder to implement, but that's the way you really got to go. Okay, coming in to the last piece, scale. Anybody know this meme? Kermit the Frog. I heard 2 Kermits. Hands up. Yep. Right. Of course. Okay. Thank you. Yep. Mythos. Whew. Before we get to Mythos, let's talk a little bit about vibe coding everywhere. All the developers are vibe coding. All of the citizen developers are vibe coding. The barrier of entry has gone way down. This has a couple of problems that come with it. The first, well, if we go back and we think about the security of the code that's being produced, and if we think about how models are actually trained, I talked a little bit about reinforcement learning. So this was that crazy killbot drone the Air Force has. You have points for something if it meets its goal. So think for a minute, how do we think we are training the models that produce generative code? The first thing that we do is we scrape the web. We pull all of the code from wherever, and how much do we trust that? Okay, so that's what we're basing things on as the seeded data. But then when we start applying the actual reinforcement learning, how can we award points? You can award points if it compiles. That's really easy. That's a binary check. It either does and you get points, or it doesn't and you take points away. You can award points for unit tests. So you think like LEET code style things. Here's the challenge. Here's the output that I expect. Run it through. Let's see if you actually meet that output or not. And I can award points. Where it gets hard is how do we do that with secure code? How do you award points with secure code? That's hard to define locally. If you're trying to develop code that's going to be enterprise secure, that's very, very different than if you're a hobbyist and you're developing a cool game for your kids to play. So we struggle with that. It's also more costly, computationally costly. That's not a quick, does it compile or not? But no, are we going to throw this into a SAST engine? And like, how do we actually do that? So Veracode published this pretty recently. You can plot these things. This is over time. In the blue is going to be syntax. How syntactically correct are the models over time? They're really good. You can go in one shot an app. If you give it a nice prompt that says, this is what I want to do, it'll spit out code that works, and the unit test will probably work. That's great. In the red line, that's going to be secure code. 45% of the code coming out of these models today is insecure in some way. But more troubling than that is the slope of this curve. It's almost flat. We've got a couple of outliers that are in there, but this is not getting better anytime soon because, one, the data that we're seeding it with is not secure, and two, we're amplifying that with reinforcement learning, which is how we train these models. This isn't getting better. So as we're developing secure code now at huge scale, we're running into some problems. We are amplifying the amount of tech debt that we've got because people are just pushing a ton of code. Just the volume of it is crazy. And it's a lot of this is just going to be very, very insecure. Let's move out of the app dev space into the AppSec space. This is one of many examples. This is a company called CodeWall. They've got a product, automated pen tests. Cool. We're going to be real whiz bang. We're just going to go out and point something. This example, they got a little bit of press. They did like 2 of these in back-to-back days. The second day was against McKinsey. And they took their autonomous agent. They said, no human in the loop. That's a great idea. Let's go and test. And within 2 hours, full read-write access to their production database. So we're getting results, right? We're seeing these examples pop up. And then we get the announcement of the newest Anthropic model, and it's got interesting timing, maybe suspicious timing around it. Claude code breach, oh no, bad press cycle, and then right after that, right on its heels, same news cycle. Check it out. We've got something that is going to disrupt absolutely everything. It is so good, we won't even let everybody have access to it. This is going to be behind the velvet rope. Only certain people get in. Okay, so that's interesting. Right on the heels, OpenAI response. I should say that Mythos is a general model. They did not train this to be anything specific to cyber. It's just a general model. It's essentially the next iteration, and Anthropic said, hey, I think that we've hit the tipping point, and we've got to start signaling some alarm. So OpenAI is doing it. Now we're in an arms race. We're off and running. This is a model that was trained to do cyber-specific kinds of things. Some of the early results, this is still very fresh. Some of the things that are coming out, I think like half the resources here are within the last couple of days. Early indications are that maybe this is a little bit of hype, but I want to temper that. What we are seeing in the entire space is that the cost of vulnerability detection is going down. The pace of AI automation on the offensive side is higher than the pace on the defensive side. So if this is the tipping point or not, if this is the watershed moment or not, we're getting there. Mythos, they're recording this. People will watch this when the story is actually played out. I might be wrong, but I don't think that we're there. I think we have time to prepare. However, we have to start preparing, because what we've got is cost of vulnerability discovery going down. That means the vulnerabilities are going to come up increasingly. We're going to see with generative code, the attack surface is going way up. We've got all these shadow ITs, right? It's so easy that somebody in whatever far reaches of your organization who needs to do some automation to make their job easier, they can go out and just one-shot something and cool, here's some automation. Are they documenting that? Is that going to be in your asset inventory somewhere? This is a challenge, and it's going to have insecure code, by the way, if they're doing that with those models of today. I didn't really put any references around log volume, but we go machine speed, we're doing a lot more action. Logs are expensive, and some of the logs that we need to be watching, things like chain of thought, they're also bigger. You know, if I'm going to be looking at an entire prompt history of chain of thought of all the things that it's doing, that can be really expensive to do as well. So that's going to be part of it. Gartner's came out. This was a first take reaction to Mythos. The broader point, whether Mythos hits the hype or not, we all need to take very seriously, which is within our processes, we have a lot of human speed bottlenecks, high latency bottlenecks that have to get addressed. And if that balance, if offensive automation continues to outpace defensive automation, we have to streamline what our defensive capabilities are. And we have to be doing that right now. So how do we do that? Yeah, to go machine speed, we need a machine, right? We need an AI buddy who can come in and help us out. Not you, Clippy, not today. Not after what happened with the wizard. We need to figure out from looking at your organization, really interrogating what are those bottlenecks look like. Vulnerability life cycle, that's going to be part of it. How quickly can you contextualize those things? If we see the influx of all these vulnerabilities, if I were to drop in your lap 500 vulnerabilities tomorrow that you need to go and figure out, how long is it going to take you to even figure out the context for what those look like? And then you got to go through and actually come up with the solution and then put the solution in place and get all the stakeholders and report on it, and it just goes for days. That's the stuff that we have to drive down right now. Because again, if the watershed moment isn't with Mythos, it's coming. We can see the writing on the wall right now. These processes have to change. Same thing with incident response. So this is a step further where now the breach has actually happened. This is where a lot of organizations, their incident responders, you get from the SOC team, most of them are pretty good from what I've seen, where they can get that alert escalated over to the first line and start getting triage going in minutes. We need seconds. We have to drive that down. There's also a volume consideration of what happens if you get a dozen incidents hit at the same time. You got to go quick, and you got to have enough people that'll actually do it. And then you've got to do all the malware analysis, and you've got to do the containment and eradication and all that stuff, your after actions. It's all time consuming. It's all high latency comparative to machine speed. These are the things that we need to take down. There are some bodies of work. So the Cloud Security Alliance has a white paper out there. This is a work in progress. This is still drafted. In draft, but it's got a bunch of big names that are tied to it for here are the steps that we need to do. We're starting to get to this stage where we need to be automating and burning down where these bottlenecks are going to be. This is the hardest one that I've got. So Bill Murray, but I need a character name and I'll give you a special prize. Bill Murray and Groundhog Day. I'll give the candy for that. Hand up if you got it. Somebody over here said it, yeah. I think there was another somewhere over here. No, nobody's. All right. You already cheated. Yep. Okay. So what do we do? What do we do next? This comes from a British cybersecurity firm, Darktrace, back in October. So we're 6 months removed from when these results came out, maybe a little bit longer, depending on how long it took them to do the analysis. The important part of this that I want to call out, so the first 3 bars are going to be talking about, are you seeing some AI risks hitting you now, near term, future term? On the bottom, does your organization treat AI risks any differently than we have traditional risks? Got 2/3 of companies saying no. We're treating AI risks the same. So all those processes that we have to get in front of to get to machine speed, we're not. So that's concerning. So probably your organization is going to be a part of that as well. I've got some high level, in terms of recommendations, a lot of this stuff is fluid. We are learning as we go. So the important part is, I would say, be aware, the awareness piece of it. So I talked a bit about accuracy. Newer models, as we advance, as capabilities of fresher frontier models emerge, some of these aren't issues that are going away. So it's no surprise. None of us expect that we're going to get 100% accuracy coming out of models, but where we start automating, that's where we need to be very mindful. There's such a big push from many of our executive leadership teams that we've got to go fast. So keep in mind what those cascading pieces are going to be. Keep in mind the accountability piece. There's a reason that we don't have more AI automation in like medical fields. AIs are really good at medical imaging. If you want to have it read an X-ray, it's going to be more accurate than you can have a doctor read that X-ray. But you cannot have insurance on that AI. You can't tie single-handedly accountability to it. So we've got some accountability issues that we need to talk through. Vibe coding is just, boy, I'm glad that I'm not in the development space anymore. Organizationally, though, you got to be aware of what your people are doing. Okay. In the middle of this, I've got a link to Find Evil. This is a cool project. This is essentially, this has a bunch of participants in it. I think SANS is like the main driver of it. And this is a democratization of trying to drive down what incident response looks like. But they've got some prizes as well. So it's, hey, pitch us what your solution would look like for how we can automate incident response. And then maybe you can win some tens of thousands of dollars kinds of things. But it's crowdsourcing. How do we get better at this as a community? So that's what I've got. Where are we in terms of time? We've got like 8 minutes. I can do questions. I've got some bonus content. I mentioned this was like a way longer thing. We can talk about deepfake. We can talk about AI as insider, or we can do some questions. So I'll pose it to the group. Somebody's got to be brave. Bonus. What do you want to hear? Deepfake. All right. Oops, I'm on the wrong one. Was I a slide behind this whole time? There we go. This is my Q&A. Willy Wonka, who said it? Yeah, who's the actor? Okay. It was Gene Wilder. I think I heard a Gene Wilder. Huh? Somebody.
I said Gene, I had Wilder though.
Okay. Who had Willy Wonka over here? Yes. Okay, so let's do deepfake. I'll keep these handy because I've got more. Get ready. This one's a tough one too. Ancient aliens. Anybody know his name? What was that? He does have a weird name, and it is Greek. You get another. Yeah. All right. Deepfake. We are primed as a society for deepfake. We are all plugged into social media, and everywhere on social media is going to be deepfake. These are filters that can be for vanity, for fun, for influencing. They can be done in real time where you put on somebody else's face. But what if the other party isn't in on it? So this is an example from a while ago. Probably you've heard it. I guess I'll go through it one more time. There's this company, Arup. They are a multinational in the UK. There was a finance employee who got a ping from the CFO that said, I want you to make 15 different wire transfers for a bunch of money. See, the employee rightfully said, this sounds fishy, this sounds totally suspicious. And so the CFO is like, all right, well, let's hop on a conference call, and let's talk it through. And there on the conference call, looking and sounding like the CFO, was a deepfake bot. And also like half a dozen other looking and sounding like half a dozen other people in the company who this poor employee victim recognized were also more deepfakes. This is the level of sophistication. And this one's like 2024, maybe? This is kind of old. So that's where we're at. This is one in maybe several different categories. I track 4 categories. I think I need to break it out because fraud has so much. It's starting to dominate in different kinds of fraud ways. So that's an example of fraud. We see politics will spike in political years. So I'm gonna have to turn my volume up because this isn't plugged in. We'll see if we can hear this. This is a good example from talking about SNAP benefits from late last year. No. My volume is up there. All right, I'll let it play, and you can look at just the video quality of it, and we'll pretend the audio is really good too. The audio is past the Rubicon. Are we? See, now I've done it. Where's my? So just looking, you can kind of see a couple of artifacts pop in and out, but how would you determine? That's going to be my question. We'll go back and we'll look at what was actually wrong with this. How would you determine if this is a deep fake or not? Hold the thought. Hold the thought. We'll come back to it. So we see in the political arena, we see a number of things. We saw like 2 years ago, there were robocalls of Joe Biden calling people up saying, don't vote. There were all kinds of things. We're going to see that this year. We've already seen a lot of deepfake. What's muddling about it is things that are clearly deepfake that just get posted with regularity. There's a, I think I've got it later. I'll hold that political one. We've also got underrepresented in the data I'm about to show, but 98% of all deepfake is going to be pornography. It's going to be a lot of just non-consensual, illicit imagery. And in this case, this woman, Lana Havalana, she was a deputy mayor of Broward County City in Florida. She had taken some selfies of herself, completely benign, innocent, in high school. She had some political beliefs that somebody didn't like, and so they turned them, they nudified them into pornographic images, and they hounded her. They forced her out of politics. She had to move a state away or a county away in order to get away from people who were recognizing her in these images. Derailed her career. Then you've got other stuff, celebrity hoaxes and whatnot. So the one on the top right, there is a principal of a school where some audio came out, a hot mic situation where he was being very denigrating of the students with racial epithets and other derogatory kinds of language. It came to be proven in court that it was the athletics director who had some negative performance reviews and whose contract wasn't going to be renewed. But the outlash from the public was huge. So this principal was put on he was put on academic leave and then eventually let go. And at the sentencing hearing, when it was known, when it was proven, when it was verifiable that this was a deepfake, they did a man on the street kind of follow-up. They were asking people, what was this? Like, what do you think about this whole thing? And people were pissed about the things that this principal never actually said. They knew that it was deepfake, but it didn't really matter. It was the first impression that hit, which is pervasive. So this is a plot over time of some of the different kinds of deepfake trends that are going on. What you can see, exponential growth. And it's going to take off in terms of politics for this year, but you can see politics, they'll pop up when it comes to election years, and then fraud, dominating overwhelmingly. There are a lot of fraud kinds of things. The rate of growth is the real takeaway here. This is an example of somebody who was looking for work. Freelance developer, David Dada. He gets a ping as you get on LinkedIn that says, hey, we're trying to develop this new cool app. We'd like to interview you. It looks like your past work matches what we're looking for. Cool, let's take a look at what this contact, oh, that's a little bit fuzzy. I'll have to fix that. So let's take a look at who is making the request. Here's the CEO of a company. He's got a profile. He's got 500 plus connections. He's filled out his skills that you can't see so well, but he's got a history of active posts. There's stuff going on. He went to a real school. So we can look at the company. Let's see if the company shows up any better, sort of. The things look good. If it weren't fuzzy, you could see that everything's filled out, and they've got branding. The things use corporate speak as they start to describe their services. They've got thousands of followers. They've got affiliate pages. They have active company posts going back for months. They also have a hiring history of real profiles of people who are being hired and fired and coming in and out of that company. So yeah, this looks legit. Our freelance contractor, David, says, let's set it up. And they say, all right, cool, let's, here's the link. This is a real scheduling app. And they send him a link to a Bitbucket that says, all right, we're going to give you a technical interview. This is super common. Go and pull this code, and we'll talk about it when we go through your technical interview. So he goes and he looks at the Bitbucket, and this picture is, it looks very AI generated, but that's par for the course when you see these kinds of things. I don't think that that would be a turnoff necessarily. So he goes and he pulls the code, and a little bit before the interview happens, something twinges in his brain where he says, maybe I should ask Cursor what it thinks. So he does. He says, is there anything in this code that would be problematic? And boom, yeah, there it is. Hidden in some of the server-side controllers, just straight up malware, ready to harvest files, crypto wallets, passwords, whatever it could get its hands on. He was saved by the AI in this, but the sophistication to build up a vetted company like this with all the history, we can automate that now. That's the level of sophistication that we're starting to see scale. And it goes on both sides. This is also people who are trying to get into your organization. I don't have it included in here. It was I've got some different numbers for the number of people who will deep fake themselves in interviews. North Korea's got a whole team that is just focused on doing exactly that. And they've gotten hired to places like security company KnowBe4 and got some press. So this is the level of sophistication. I'd put this into the fraud category. The things that you should look for, this is really hard because it's changing so quickly. So we need to embrace that if you think that you can spot deepfake, maybe you can today, maybe. If we look at some of the things that, I'll continue the thread, where it comes to interviewing people, this is something that you can do today. Where it comes to hiring practices, if you're a hiring manager, if you're on a hiring panel, quick check. If you have somebody profile view, the way that a lot of real-time deepfake masks go is they put a mask just on the front of your face. So you'll break it if you look to the side, or put a few fingers in front of your face. And there's an example, this one doesn't have sound, so it's not going to be nearly as good. There are a bunch of these examples that you can go find on YouTube as well. The person talking will just pretend, oh, hi, good job on the interview. Please put your hand in front of the face. And this guy just terminates the interview. He just won't do it. And there are a bunch of these examples that come up. Without sound, it's not quite as good because he gets kind of funny. All right, so we had some tells. Who had a tell for this? Yeah, what'd you see? In front of the face? Especially the mouth. So the mouth is pretty well synced. Yeah. What else? What else did you see? Yeah.
The kind of nonsense way the cars park.
It is a little bit odd. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. The car colors are my favorite. So you all got this wrong. The giveaway is that it was branded AI. But if you actually look at the comments, again, it doesn't matter. It's the first impression. The first impression. So some of those other things that you can look at, there's some artifacting both with the Sora up in the top corner, but also on the woman's vest there, it kind of comes in and out. The cars are my favorite. It's a red light, and they're all turning left out of all of the different lanes. And then you've got this other car that's like dragging half of a car. All right. If you're looking for it, you can see it. But they're pretty sophisticated. On first blush, it looks really good. The political arena, anybody track on the is Netanyahu alive thing? Yeah, it's wild. So there's some videos of, if you look at his hands, does he have an extra finger in there? And then there is something where he was wearing a ring and then he wasn't wearing a ring. And it's like, okay, this is all generative. And so he came out and he made a proof of life video where he was like, see, I've got all the right fingers. And he kept taking a sip from his cup, but then the cup never went down in volume. And people were just like, no, there's no way. So he's alive. Those were not deep fake images, but now we've got it seeded where we don't know what we believe. And that's kind of the point. They can fool you really well, but so can reality. The last thing that I'll say, this one also has audio for the 2025 where it sounds really good. The rate of progression in 2 years is astronomical. Where are we going to be in another 2 years? I love that Will Smith eating spaghetti is the litmus test for how well deepfake is progressing. All right. In terms of, oh yeah, that's it. How are we on time? I think we might be out at this point. We are over. Okay. You're all late to your next session. Thank you so much. If you've got questions, come find me. All right.